So this FMS is done on my sister. She's 32 years old. And for clinical and movement history, there's no real sport history as a child or any significant injuries that might have occurred when she was a kid. She didn't start playing sports up until high school, and that's when she also started strength and resistance training, for the softball team. And around her sophomore year, she received a possible MCL sprain to her right knee. Um, this was supposedly diagnosed by the athletic trainer at the time, but no real rehab was done for whatever reason. Just sort of jump on the bike and ice bags. Possibly her fault for not going in and seeking treatment. But there's no real pain there now or anything that really bothers her. She did fracture her left fibula her senior year, and again, no real rehab was done after it healed. Um, and there was also after high school, no real training, resistance training or aerobic training was done until a few years after. Um, but all of her jobs in high school, or all of her jobs in general, have required her to sit for long periods of time. So I wouldn't doubt that there's a lot of glute amnesia from working at the bank, at a law office, now in a school district, just constantly sitting and typing away and doing paperwork and whatnot. She has recently been exercising consistently for the past 5 months, about 4 times a week. But again, mostly aerobic style exercise, a lot of cardio, body weight type of training. Not too much resistance training since the gyms are closed and there's no real access to weights and whatnot. So, and if she does, it's mostly all body weight type, kind of high intensity training. And but there's no real recent injuries, no pain, no abnormal soreness or tightness. Every now and then, possibly, a cramp in her calf, but could be lack of mobility or just the malnutrition and lack of hydration. Here for the deep squat, the first thing that I noticed when she started squatting is that her feet automatically externally rotated to really try to compensate and get as low as possible and open up her hips to go low. There was a slight tilt leaning on to the left side of her body. The PVC pipe stayed pretty straight for the most part overhead, with respect to the back of the garage, which is, pretty straight. Here in the side view, we can see that her back is staying in a decent position, pretty neutral, but there's definitely a posterior pelvic tilt. The lumbar is starting to round over, and definitely don't want that to happen. The bar is staying over her toes and not really aligned with the rest of her body, and we can really see that the heels are coming off the ground a little bit, and that's why I had her be barefoot, just to really see this. Shoes, sometimes the thickness of the heel can help out, but I really wanted to eliminate that. Here in the side view, now there's a board underneath her heels, and now she's definitely able to hit that depth. That femur's going below horizontal. We're taking that dorsiflexion out of the picture, and now it's really starting to look like a good squat. Her back is definitely staying more neutral. There's still a little bit of what I call a butt wink, or that posterior pelvic tilt, and the bar could be a little bit more above her head, but I didn't know how much instruction I should really give. I just kind of really wanted her to do it. She probably could have be able to do it, but here in the front view, we can really see that there's still a little bit of a slight tilt to the left side, a little bit of a weight transfer to the left side, but other than that, her body from the front part is still upright. Her knees aren't caving in, they're really opening up and following the same path of her toes. Here for the hurdle step, the tibial tuberosity, the height of it measured at 15 inches and a quarter. So that's at the very top of the broom. With the two buckets, and the top of the broom is exactly at 15 and a quarter. And from this side view, we can see that there's a little bit of movement going on in the lumbar, really extending back, trying to get that leg around, and the back stays pretty neutral. The thoracic and up stays pretty decent, and decent balance as well. And then here from the front view, we can see that her left leg really begins to internally rotate as the leg swings around. Um, Again, still able to keep a decent amount of balance, and we can see that that straight leg also kind of tilts to the side a little bit, so there's definitely some compensation there. But that left leg really starts to internally rotate as she swings that leg around. Now, from this right leg, it's very similar to her left leg from this side view. It's kind of difficult to tell what's going on, but from the front angle that we'll see shortly, there's definitely a difference into how high the leg is able to come, as well as how much internal rotation is actually going on. From this front view, we can really see that the leg is getting up higher than the left leg was, but there's definitely some more internal rotation of that leg. Her left leg is staying, pretty stable, but there's definitely some weight transfer to that, some compensation going on. But her balance is pretty decent and was able to still complete it. So for the inline lunge, I measured the distance, which was the height of her tibial tuberosity, so at 15 inches and a quarter. And surprisingly, she surprised me with how well she was actually able to do. From the left leg forward, there's a slight body tilt going forward, so that upper body kind of slightly tilting forward, but still maintaining a really good balance, and was able to complete it. From the front view, we can see that her body's staying pretty in line. Her toes and her feet weren't trying to widen to make the exercise easier. But I wouldn't necessarily give this a 3, especially since that body was leaning forward. Again, I probably could have instructed her to keep that body more upright, but I didn't know or think I should give more instructions than what was given. And she's wearing shoes for this one, only because that 2x6, it's not very smooth, so there's a decent amount of splinters and that were bothering her when she was doing it barefoot. But still, I think this was great. I was pretty surprised at how well it looks. I probably wouldn't be able to look as good as this, but still very balanced, and body was nice and aligned. We can see here that this side still looks very similar to the other side. Maybe there's a little bit of lean to the right side of the hip, but I still think it looks very well. So this is her dominant hand, which was her throwing hand when she was playing softball, and this measured at 4.5 inches, where her overall length of her hand was 6 3/4. So definitely got a 3 on this side. And this is her left arm, and clearly there's a big difference. It ended up measuring at about 9.5 inches. So the score still would be a 2, since her overall hand length was 6 3/4. But definitely not that good of mobility. Here for the active straight leg raise, that midline where I have the tape was measured from the top of her hip to her tibial tuberosity. So that's at about 10.5 inches. There's a bit of external rotation that's really being able to see on the left leg, which is the leg that's down. And the knee doesn't really start coming up until she reaches that midline, right where the PVC pipe is. So I would score this possibly at a 2. And from the front view, we'll see in a bit that there's a slight of external rotation of that leg that's on the ground. Here in the front view, we'll be able to see that left leg really kind of externally rotate, as well as the hip slightly wanting to come up off the ground. And we'll see right there that the knee was coming up as well, but it was pretty much almost right at when she was reaching that midline. the other side, we'll see in a bit. There's definitely the hip was really trying to come up, so we'll definitely have to go in and figure something out to get that other hip loosened up and want to stay on the ground. So on this leg, I'd probably score this a 1. That leg that's on the ground, the knee starts to come off the board before she even reaches that midline. And from the front view, it doesn't get any better. We're going to see that it really starts to externally rotate, and the hip tries to come off the ground, but we can clearly see that the knee, how much it's coming off the ground and on this side angle. Now, from this front view, we'll see that her right leg that's on the ground will really externally rotate right about there, and then that hip just starts rising up and her body starts tilting a bit. Again, from the side view, we saw that the knee was coming up before she even reached that midline, and we'll see again here how starts coming up and slightly externally rotating, and right there just starts kind of tilting and hip starts coming up. So for the trunk stability push-up, we did try to do it at first with the hands right by the chin, but it did not look good at all. And you'll see here that this, with her hands by her shoulders, doesn't look any better. That upper body really starts to come up. Her low back really begins to extend in her lumbar, but her lower body also doesn't stay. Her legs don't stay aligned. Nothing really stays aligned. So not that great of stability. You got to work on that core and really keep her body aligned. From this front view, that first push off especially, I kind of noticed that her right arm was and her right side of her body was really coming off the ground first before her left, possibly just because that's her dominant, but we definitely need to work on trying to balance that out. Again, we can see how much her upper body comes up and her low back really stays down low and doesn't stay aligned, especially with her legs. Side view, now she's going to be doing contralateral. I believe her right arm is going to come up and try to touch her left knee. It was pretty decent, but when she does begin, that thoracic spine definitely rounds over. Again, a posterior pelvic tilt, that lumbar starts to come in to try to touch her knee to her arm. When she extends, her arm is pretty decent, but her leg is unable to completely extend, as we see right there. Definitely needs to come up a little higher, a little wobbly, but still was able to complete a few reps. And here from this front side, we can see that the body's staying pretty balanced. I don't see too much of like a weight transfer to one side or the other to try to compensate, but clearly not a 3. Really on the border between like a 1 and a 2 for this score, but still her opposite legs and hands were and feet as well were still touching the board when doing it. And then from this front side, this is now going to be her left arm coming up. From the side angle, this side was her thoracic spine was really rounding over for this side. Not so much of a weight transfer that I see either. We can see right there that the leg was really extending out and then going back instead of completely staying in line. Let's see if we can see that again here. It kind of has a diagonal path going into the arm, kicks out, and then straight back, which I found kind of weird. We can see it right there. It's not staying completely in line. And then from this side angle, that back really rounds over right there. Ooh, yeah. So, and we can see that the back leg isn't even able to extend completely. It's worse on this side than it was on the other. So definitely need to work on that as well. Look at that spine just really rounding over. trying to touch.